Lynnette Craft was ready to escape her abusive marriage. But unfortunately, she never got the chance. That morning, as she packed to leave with her infant son, her husband Thomas Craft arrived home early. Moments later, the garage door shut behind them, and Lynnette was never seen alive again.
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
When it comes to stories of revenge, murder, abuse, one thing is clear. That's a concept that's universal, regardless of where you are. Whether you find yourself in East Los Angeles, or Brooklyn, New York, or the small town of Swanton, Ohio. The fact is, people can do truly terrible and evil things. As an Ohioan myself, I can tell you, our state is a diverse yet quaint place, an area so average that many businesses test market to us directly. Tonight's story is about a woman who decided to escape an abusive marriage, and unfortunately, she was too late. We'll get to that after this. On June 28th, 1999, 36-year-old Lynnette Craft was preparing to leave her home in Swanton, Ohio, with her two sons, desperate to escape an abusive marriage. Her husband, Thomas Craft, had grown increasingly controlling, isolating her from friends and family. That day, as she packed her belongings, Thomas came home early from work. A heated argument erupted. With their infant son in her arms, Lynnette was last seen alive, as Thomas shut the garage door behind them. For days, Thomas offered conflicting explanations for her absence, telling her worried family that she had gone shopping, then later suggesting she was having an affair. But when her father, Alan Quast, arrived at their home and found no trace of his daughter, he reported her missing. Within hours, a chilling discovery was made. Body parts were found discarded at a McDonald's dumpster in Michigan. Among the evidence was an Ohio driver's license belonging to Lynnette Craft. As investigators unraveled the case, they found disturbing evidence hidden beneath the surface of what seemed like an ordinary marriage. Bloodstains in the bathtub, carpet, and garage painted a grim picture of what had transpired behind closed doors. Thomas's actions in the aftermath suggested a calculated attempt to cover up the crime, methodically disposing of body parts and inquiring about trash pickup schedules in advance. But even in the face of overwhelming evidence, Thomas Craft denied responsibility. He claimed Lynnette had taken her own life, and in an act of misplaced mercy, he had attempted to conceal the suicide in order to protect her devout Christian family from the stigma. The court, however, saw through his lies. Thomas ultimately entered an Alford plea, acknowledging that the state had enough evidence to convict him without admitting guilt. After serving 12 years in prison, Thomas was released in 2011, but his freedom reignited a legal battle. Lynnette's family fought to prevent him from returning to Wisconsin, near the sons he had left motherless. Their efforts led to the proposal of Lynnette's Law, aiming to prevent convicted killers from being released without input from the victims' families. But even with a conviction, lingering questions remain. Did Thomas Craft believe he could get away with murder? And when a victim is silenced, how do we ensure their story is still heard? Lynnette Marie Craft was born on December 16, 1962, in Whitewater, Woolworth County, Wisconsin, to Alan and Barbara Quast. Her mother was a homemaker while her father worked in a factory to support their family. Lynnette was described as a loving daughter, deeply cherished by her parents and her two brothers, Bobby and Tommy Quast. Bob, in particular, expressed how much he and Tommy adored their sister. She was raised in a devout Christian household, where faith played a central role in their daily lives. Those who knew Lynnette described her as kind and caring, and dedicated to her family. Thomas Craft was born in 1963 in Whitewater, Wisconsin, to his parents, Ed and Janet Craft. He and Lynnette had known each other since childhood, both growing up in the same small town. Their connection began early, having met in kindergarten and continuing to build their friendship throughout their school years. By high school, their relationship had blossomed into a romance. The two became high school sweethearts, and their bond was admired by many. To those around them, Lynnette and Thomas seemed like the perfect couple. Bob Quast described his sister as the beautiful blonde cheerleader whom everyone wanted to be with. After high school, Lynnette and Thomas pursued higher education while maintaining their relationship. Lynnette chose to study nursing, a field that aligned with her nurturing and compassionate nature, while Thomas pursued a degree in engineering. Their love remained strong despite the challenges of college life, and at the age of 21, they decided to get married. Their union seemed like the continuation of a lifelong fairy tale, and from the outside, they appeared to be deeply in love. After completing their education, Thomas secured a job opportunity in Swanton, Ohio, prompting the couple to relocate and begin the next chapter of their lives. The couple welcomed their first child, a son named Chris, shortly after settling in Ohio. As the years went by, they continued to build their family and create a life that seemed ideal to those looking in from the outside. Nearly 8 years later, Lynnette became pregnant again, but doctors warned her that this was a high-risk pregnancy. Despite the challenges, on November 20th, 1998, she gave birth to their second son, Brian. Lynnette was a devoted mother who dedicated herself to raising her children and managing their home, ensuring that her family was well taken care of. To outsiders, everything appeared picture perfect, but beneath the surface, the reality of Lynnette's life was far from ideal. Allegations later surfaced that Thomas was not the loving husband he appeared to be, but rather an abusive and controlling partner. Over time, people around Lynnette began noticing signs that something was wrong. Friends and family observed changes in her demeanor. Once friendly and talkative, she had become withdrawn and distant. Her lively spirit seemed to have dimmed, raising concerns among those who cared about her. Although the outward image of their marriage suggested happiness, those closest to Lynnette suspected that she was suffering in silence. The telltale signs of domestic abuse became more apparent as the years continued to pass, yet few truly knew the extent of what was happening behind closed doors. Lynnette had always been a loving wife and mother, but beneath that surface, she may have been carrying burdens that no one truly understood. As time went on, Lynnette became increasingly isolated from her loved ones. Friends noticed they were hearing from her less and less, and she confided in them that Thomas was deliberately cutting her off from the people who cared about her. She admitted that he controlled nearly every aspect of her life, making it difficult for her to maintain relationships outside their home. One of the few people she could still turn to was her neighbor, Mildred Pinky Oberheim, to whom she often spoke about her marital struggles. Despite her isolation, Lynnette longed to reconnect with her family. On June 25, 1999, she had a 2-hour phone conversation with her brother Bob, revealing that Thomas had forbidden her from attending his wedding and refused to let her see anyone in the family. Deeply troubled by what he heard, Bob pleaded with his sister to leave Thomas as soon as possible. Bob's concern for Lynnette only grew, and he did everything he could to convince her to escape while she still had a chance. He reassured her that she had a support system waiting for her and urged her to act quickly. At the time, her eldest son, Chris, was already staying with their parents in Wisconsin, which made her decision to leave even more pressing. On June 28, 1999, Lynnette finally decided to take control of her future. She began packing her belongings, preparing to leave with her infant son Brian. But before she could finish, Thomas unexpectedly arrived home early from work. When he saw what was happening, a heated argument erupted. With Brian in her arms, Lynnette found herself trapped. Tensions escalated. Thomas then closed the garage door. That was the last time anyone ever saw or heard from Lynnette. The following day, Alan and Barbara Quast called their daughter, worried after not hearing from her. Thomas answered the phone and casually claimed that Lynnette was at the mall. When they called again on June 30th, their unease deepened. This time, Thomas gave an unsettling response. Quote, "I don't know. I'm getting concerned about that. I think she's having an affair on me." His words only raised more questions. That night, Alan was overcome by a powerful feeling. An unshakable voice in his mind urged him, "Go find and save Lynnette." Acting on instinct, he got into his car and drove through the night, arriving at the Crafts' home around 4:30 a.m. on July 1st. Exhausted and desperate for answers, he let himself in and fell asleep on a downstairs sofa. When Alan woke up, he wasted no time. He went straight to the Swanton Police Department to report his daughter missing. According to the police report filed at approximately 8:30 a.m. on July 1st, 1999, Thomas told Alan that he had not seen Lynnette since noon on Wednesday. While Alan was alarmed, he hesitated. His daughter had left before during difficult times, but she had always come back. However, something about this situation felt different. His growing sense of dread told him that this time, Lynnette wasn't coming home. That evening, around 6:30 p.m., a Washtenaw County Sheriff's detective contacted Swanton Police with grim news. He was investigating a possible homicide and had made a horrifying discovery. In a trash bin near a McDonald's on Zeeb Road in Scio Township, Michigan, officers had found human remains, legs severed from the knee down, along with feet. Among the discarded items, they recovered an Ohio driver's license belonging to Lynnette Craft. The missing persons case had turned into something far more sinister. With mounting evidence against him, Thomas Craft, then 36 years old, was arrested and charged with murder. At the time of his arrest, he was holding baby Brian in his arms. The infant was placed under the temporary care of Mildred Pinky Oberheim before being moved to foster care. Meanwhile, Alan Quast made the heartbreaking phone call to his wife, Barbara, delivering the news they had feared the most. He then returned to Wisconsin to inform the rest of the family. At that moment, Bob Quast was dealing with an unrelated issue. His 6-car garage had flooded from heavy rains, and he was busy trying to clear out the water. Then, his phone rang. The moment he picked up, his world came crashing down. Quote, "I never screamed so loud in my life," he later recalled. "I fell to my knees, collapsed in the bathroom, and started throwing up. It was the worst moment of my life." The remains of Lynnette Craft that were recovered were laid to rest in a cemetery near her parents' home. While the family mourned their devastating loss, the legal proceedings against Thomas Craft stretched on for months. On April 19, 2000, the trial finally came to an end with his sentencing. Craft's defense team claimed that he had come home to find Lynnette's lifeless body on the kitchen floor, alleging that she had stabbed herself once in the chest. However, the prosecution presented forensic evidence that painted a much darker picture of what had truly transpired. Bob Quast revealed that forensic experts had used blacklights to uncover blood traces in key areas of the couple's home. Investigators found evidence of blood in the bathtub, beneath the carpet, and inside the garage, suggesting an attempt to clean up a crime scene rather than the aftermath of a suicide. Additionally, prosecutors argued that Thomas had meticulously planned his actions after Lynnette's death. According to their findings, he had conducted a dry run, stopping at various locations to ask about trash collection schedules before ultimately disposing of body parts. His actions were calculated and deliberate, leaving little room for doubt about his intent. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Thomas maintained his innocence. His version of events suggested that Lynnette had taken her own life, and in a misguided effort to shield her family from the shame of suicide, he decided to cover it up. His defense team pointed out that the coroner's ruling listed the cause of death as undeterminable, which they used to cast doubt on the prosecution's claims. In April of 2000, Thomas entered an Alford plea in the Fulton County Common Pleas Court. Not an admission of guilt, but an acknowledgement that the state had enough evidence to convict him. In exchange for the plea, he received a reduced 12-year prison sentence. While Thomas served his time behind bars, Lynnette's 2 sons, Chris and Brian, were raised by their maternal grandparents. For years, they were shielded from the painful details of their mother's death. It wasn't until they were older that they learned the full truth. The reality of their loss became even more distressing when, on Mother's Day, the Quast family discovered that Thomas was planning to release a book, claiming he had been wrongfully convicted. His intentions to return to Wisconsin after his release, near where Chris and Brian lived, only deepened the family's concerns. Determined to prevent Thomas from ever coming near his children again, Bob Quast took action. He and his family campaigned to create legal protections for victims' families, ultimately leading to the proposal of Lynnette's Law. The law stipulated that no convicted felon should be released from prison without prior approval of the conditions of supervision from the victim's family, unless such approval was unreasonably withheld. Additionally, the law sought to classify any attempt to conceal a homicide across state lines as a federal offense, punishable by any term of imprisonment up to and including life. Thomas Craft was released from prison in 2011, but was kept under state supervision. Instead of returning to Wisconsin, as he had planned, he was placed in a halfway house in Ohio's Allen County. In 2015, he found employment as a maintenance technician at Lakeview Farms. As of today, Thomas Craft resides in St. Mary's, Ohio, living a life of freedom, while the family he shattered continues to carry the weight of Lynnette's tragic and senseless death. In the end, Thomas Craft's actions shattered a family and left an unthinkable void. Though he was sentenced for his crimes, the full truth of what happened behind closed doors may never be fully known. His calculated attempts to cover up Lynnette's disappearance only deepened the pain for those who loved her, forcing them to relive the nightmare with every new revelation. The trauma of her murder has rippled far beyond her immediate family, leaving investigators and anyone who came close to the case disturbed by the chilling details. For Lynnette's loved ones, the fight for justice did not end with Craft's conviction. Their battle to keep him away from their children and their home state became a testament to their enduring grief and determination. Even after his release, Craft maintained his innocence, attempting to rewrite history in his own favor. But no matter how many times he tries to shift the narrative, one undeniable truth remains. Lynnette never had a chance to tell her side of the story. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields, Mark Shields, and Bobbletopia.com. It's produced by Dan Wilder with original music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us directly for as little as $1 a month, simply go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. Your support helps us keep the podcast going and growing. And speaking of, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their name at the end of the show. And they are Jessica Fuller, Johnny Nix, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Brent McCullough, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you right here next time on Terrifying and True on Weekly Spooky.